And it was quite an emotional day because people feel strongly about these matters. What I learned was that the municipal councils, almost without exception, opted for the two-tier system, and the citizens did not opt in majority for the one-tier system, but there was a very significant component among taxpayers who wanted to have a one-tier system. With the exception of the town of Wolfsburg, which is afraid of everything that is going to happen because they fear that they're going to be a suburb of Chatham. There were people who recited poetry, who came and sang songs. They gave me gifts. That was quite an extraordinary event that day. And there were about 300 people in the room, or 200 some in the room, and they were still there at the end of the day, pleading with each other and with me, to do this or to do that. What was interesting, though, is that whether Chatham should be in or out was not a point of debate at all, except for the city of Chatham. They passed a motion saying, we don't want to have anything to do with this. Well, too bad. The minister has ordered me to somehow include the city of Chatham, and they know that. So they are thinking about it. So the public consultation was over, and then I realized there were so many loose ends in my thinking too, and it was not simply a matter of this model or that model. Both models that I had presented, I think, were flawed. The two-tier system that I proposed was flawed in that I had not identified those services that, in my view, should be at the upper tier, and the one-tier system that I had proposed was flawed in that my representation model was too simple. I had gone from 120 officials, elected officials, to 10. And people said that is too simplistic. You need more people on the one-tier system. Let me talk about the services at the upper tier. Because meanwhile the world has changed, and the draft Municipal Act is quite clear, or at least tries to be clear, what should be at the upper level. And the lower level, the lower tier municipalities, at least in Kent County, didn't want to hear about that. Each individual municipality wanted to deliver all services, with the exception of social services, homes for the aged, and libraries. That was existing at the county level, and as far as everybody was concerned, that could remain at the county level. But things like emergency services, including police and ambulance, and I'm not even talking about all the services that are going to be transferred to the municipalities as a result of who does what. And nobody thought about that. I took them through an exercise in accounting, and we calculated together. I struck a little group of municipal people and an accountancy firm that I had hired, and showed that if the entire transfer would take place as it was being announced, they would start with a $28 million shortfall, never mind savings. So I said to them, how are you going to cope with that? Well, nobody really wanted to think very much about that. Although I may be doing injustice to them when I say that. So there is an avalanche of responsibilities coming down on municipalities in Ontario. And everybody thinks that they can handle those best by staying alone, rather than by uniting somehow. So the mandate is process-oriented, and then, after having published this interim proposal, I met with all the municipalities again, and I asked them very specific questions about reserve funds, and about staff, and about unionization, and about all kinds of things that have to be dealt with in the final order. Because in the final analysis, I will have to issue an order saying, this is the structure that Chatham-Kent is going to be governed by. And that is an horrendous responsibility, because you see all the emotions that are surrounding this issue, and one is very much aware of that. And at the same time, you know, there comes a moment that you have to say, well, in my best judgment, this is the way it ought to be in order for you to survive in the future of municipal government in Ontario. And I want to deviate for a second. I think that municipal government is the government of the future. Speaking as an ex-federal deputy minister, which I was for 5 years, I think the lights are going out in Ottawa. And the money flow to the provinces is diminishing and diminishing and diminishing. And the provinces turn around, and the money flow from the province to the municipalities is diminishing and diminishing and diminishing. And the province knows that, and that's why there is a new municipal act. They're saying to the municipalities, you're on your own. You have the powers of a natural person, modified here and modified there, strengthened or diminished, whatever, but you're on your own. You have to raise the money and you have to deliver the services, and don't count on us. And that's a very abrupt summary of the presentation you heard from Dana Richardson, I'm sure. But that is the truth, as I see it. So that has to be kept in mind. In fact, my terms of reference say that I have to keep an open mind with respect to the impact of the provincial government's recent legislative and administrative initiatives affecting municipal government. But what is more important is to see what the principles are that I have to obey in all of this. The first one is less government, fewer municipalities, reduced municipal spending, fewer elected representatives, reduced special purpose bodies, you know, public utility commissions, whatever, library boards, all of that. Effective representation must be accessible, accountable, representative, a size that permits efficient priority setting. And that one we have debated in public, I don't know, at least a dozen times. Because the trade-off, of course, is between what there is now, a county council of some 40 people, which is not very efficient in making priority setting, and the other extreme is one person, a dictator, who just says, this is the way it shall be done. And somewhere in between, one has to find a system that does all of this, and yet is able to deal with priorities in an efficient manner. Best value for taxpayers' dollars? Well, you can imagine what they are: efficient service delivery, reduced duplication and overlap. These things are not mutually exclusive. In other words, you can reach maximization in one of them, but it's at the expense of something else. So there's always a trade-off, and I cannot maximize them all. The skill is going to be to maximize as many as possible, but to maximize them all is not possible. And that is why there is so much dispute. You know, when it is left to the local solution, without formulating it that way, people sense that, people feel that. And that is why many times there is no solution locally, because they simply stop talking to each other. Then there is the ability to provide municipal services from municipal resources, local self-reliance to finance municipal services, very important point, and then a supportive environment for job creation, investment and economic growth. So, in other words, no longer competition of municipalities within a county, say, to get an industry located somewhere. So those are the terms of reference, and that is the mandate. Now let me tell you a little bit about Kent County. I would like to show you some slides. It's a marvelous piece of Ontario. It's full of history. It is rich literally, and there's lots of money, a lot of interesting industrial development, and I would like to show you some of it. Could you switch on the projector, please?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. Power on, off, that's it. So, Kent County. I was appointed in February, and you can see there was snow on the ground. Here's the county. This is Lambton. This is Elgin. Here's Essex. Lake Simcoe. Lake Erie. Chatham in the middle. Is this in focus? Can you see this? Is this in focus? For me, it is not. Oops. No, I can manage that from here. So, here is the corporate headquarters, the county seat. Formidable building. The essence of the conflict in Kent County is a deep-seated competition between some local municipalities and the county. There are 6 towns, there are 5 or 6 villages, a number of townships, 21 municipalities in total, and some of the municipalities in South Kent have sort of intellectually united, and the united force was really against the county. The county was seen as being inefficient, it takes too long to make decisions, you only meet once a month, you have a big building. This is the civic center in Chatham, the town hall, very beautiful. Chatham is a lovely town, as you can see, very well kept, very well organized. It was the first city in Ontario that introduced the city manager, way back, and they still have a city manager. Historic buildings. This is the old courthouse where the first county met in 1845, before Confederation. And after it being a county seat, it became a courthouse again. And of course there are people in the Ministry of Attorney General in Ontario who say, well, presently, but there's now the county seat should perhaps become a courthouse. So people are already looking at what might happen to some of the buildings. This is Chatham, you know, just some residential districts. And then the industry is very interested because it is a very high quality, specialized industry all throughout the county, associated with the automotive agreement between Canada and the US. So Rockwell International, they produce springs for cars and trucks, and they supply the North American market. This is the headquarters of Union Gas, a national enterprise, as you know. Homes for the Aged, this is the Home for the Aged, run by the county. This is not a very interesting picture, but everybody wants you to see this. Because when you talk about examining duplication and overlap in Kent County, they all say, have you seen the 3 garages? Well, these are the 3 garages. That's the township garage, that's the county garage, and that is the provincial garage. And they all have the same equipment. I don't have to belabor the point, you know what I'm talking about. So around this beautiful city, Chatham, is the countryside. And the countryside is very rich farmland. It's the richest farmland in Canada. Big farms, big farms, very well kept. And for somebody coming from Lanark County, it's interesting to see there are no fences, because there's no livestock. No fences, no weeds. It's just, you know, it's my home country, Holland. And as you will see in a minute, it reminds me very much of Holland, and you will see why. This is Wallaceburg, the town hall of Wallaceburg. You can see it's extremely well kept. Wallaceburg has more industry, traditional industry. Glass, some canning factories. This is a glass plant. And then there are some smaller settlements. Here Dresden, 2,700 people. This is the residential area in Dresden. This is the town hall of Bothwell. Bothwell was famous because one of the fathers of Confederation had some land speculation here. And the plaque says, there's a little plaque here says that this particular father of Confederation made $250,000 speculating in land. He bought some land that subsequently became part of the railroad. This is a French community. The ethnic mix in Kent County is very interesting. 12% is Dutch or Flemish, Belgian, and there is a very interesting component of French Canadians, not Quebecois, but immigrants from France and immigrants from Wallonia. in Belgium, French-speaking part. And this community is called Pencourt. But it's very interesting to hear you talk about identity. I use this as an example because people say, in amalgamation we are going to lose our identity. And I say, well, what about Pencourt? They don't have a government of any kind. It is just a community. And they have been a community for 110 years. And they have kept that community beautifully intact. Pencourt. This is Dover Township, one of the townships. You can see what I mean, you know. All of this land is drained with subterranean drains because it is quite wet. But once it's drained, it is very, very good agricultural soil. Here, this is what reminds me of Holland, in that this is the Thames River, with children playing on the ice. This is the dike, and the land being lower than the water level. I mean, this is classical Dutch, and a sense of tremendous pride in the people who have been able to reclaim that land. This is the town of Blenheim. This is Erio, a small village, 460 people, at the shore of Lake Erie. You can see the ice here of Lake Erie. And the town hall and the fire station. Almost all fire services are volunteer services. People are immensely proud of that. Also because the fire services raise a lot of money in the community for all kinds of other purposes, rather than just buying fire trucks, you know, arenas and all that. Well, you know what I mean. This is Erie Beach. It's a very wealthy, small community, only some 500 people, but beautiful, beautiful homes, also on the shore of Lake Erie. And close to the shore of Lake Erie, because of the microclimate, there is an orchard culture, orchard industry. I think these are peaches, although I'm not sure about that. Apple. Okay, apple. Wheatley, a small community that has an entirely different industry, namely a fishing industry, with a big fish processing plant, Olmsted, which is owned by Heinz. So this summarizes the proposals that I put before the people, and that is, this is the present configuration. There's the townships and the villages and the towns and the city of Chatham. And the first proposal would be a community called East Kent, South Kent, West Kent, North Kent, Wallaceburg and Chatham. Now these terms I did not invent. Those were part of that 5+1 proposal that I found when I came there. So I simply kept those terms and I kept those boundaries. So in the first proposal, these would be individual communities, all of them, in a county system with an upper tier county government, or the whole thing would be a one-tier system with these being the wards that people would be elected to the municipal council. You can see here municipalities at the moment 23. In the uni-county proposal, that they would be reduced to 6, and the two-tier level, two-tier system, and in the one-tier system, they would be reduced to 1. These figures, by the way, are out of date. I'm now using the 1996 Statistics Canada census, and this is an assessment survey, and the actual population is about 114,000. And you can see the councillors going from 131 to 41 in the two-tier, and to 11 in the one-tier. And this is how a cartoonist captured the reaction to my proposal. The one-tier, the two-tier, and the multi-tier. Those of you who know the mayor of Chatham will recognize him because of his moustache. So that is where we are at the moment. May I have the lights back on, please? I'll give you a few concluding observations. First of all, the switch from a local solution to what essentially will be an imposed solution is a very difficult switch to make. And I'm trying to be as sensitive as I can to the local concerns, but as I said earlier, in the final analysis, I will have to have a restructuring proposal on the table. The second observation is that there is a sharp distinction between what the elected officials think ought to be done and what taxpayers think ought to be done. And that really is sharp. The third point I want to make is the question of rural-urban, which is entirely artificial, at least in Kent County. Because many people live in the country and live in Chatham Township, they work in Wallaceburg or in Chatham, so they are urbanites by day and then they are rural people by night. And really they live in one environment. The mayor of Wallaceburg has a job in Chatham, and yet he sees Chatham as sort of an enemy sometimes. I have to be gentle to him, but nevertheless that is how he sees it sometimes. But in general, you know, I have received 240 letters about, and the number of letters that speak about the artificiality of that split is absolutely astonishing. People who say, you know, I have a sister living there and a brother living there and my parents live in the next county. Really, it's all one, you know. And don't get hung up. They warn me, they advise me not to believe this artificial split. But it is an issue, and it is an issue one has to be sensitive to. The most difficult issue is the issue of savings. And I was absolutely delighted with what you said, Mr. Warden, because you were so right, you know. But savings are seen as the purpose of the exercise. Well, it isn't. The purpose of the exercise is better government in a changing world, almost the title of your conference today. Now, savings are important because people say, well, one of the townships engaged consultants, as you talked about, and they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars figuring out what the savings would be. And the conclusion of the consultant was that the two-tier system would save $3 million per year, and the one-tier system would save $6 million per year. And the politicians were saying, for $3 million difference, we get a lot more representation. So the trade-off that was being made between savings and representation was interpreted by the municipal councils in favor of the two-tier system. The citizens are saying every dollar counts. I issued a discussion paper on savings, and I said, in my view, you can save much more than 6. It is probably closer to 12. And I took them through a calculation that nobody liked. Namely, savings are of two kinds. First of all, you can have negotiated savings. A council can say to its administration, how much do you think you can save? And the administration comes back and says, well, perhaps $1 million or whatever. There is a negotiation process going on. Conversely, a council can say, we don't care how you do it, we want you to save $2 million. That's an imposed saving. There is a professor at the University of Western Ontario by the name of Andrew Sancton, who's always consulted on savings, because he says there is no amalgamation in the world that has cost savings, has produced savings. What he means is there are no net savings, because a structure by itself does not produce savings. It is the council that produces savings. So whatever structure you create, it will be the council of that structure that can bring about savings. And that new council will be confronted by two opposing financial forces. The first stream going this way, or this way rather, because it is a stream of increasing this expenditure. The first stream is made up of things such as unionization, harmonization of collective agreements, severance pay for people who have to leave. So there's a whole set of expenditures that is facing a new council to increase expenditures. And then there are forces that say, you know, well, if you amalgamate the hydro trucks with the fire trucks or whatever, you can save money. And whatever the net outcome is, are the net savings. And in the case of Kingston, the order that establishes the new city of Kingston identifies the savings. It says there shall be savings of either $7 million or 15% of the discretionary expenditures, whichever is more. And then the order goes on to say, and those savings shall be used for the following purposes. So the order instructs the new municipality to save money, and at the same time says, and the money is going to be spent for the following purposes, namely the buyout that is necessary for staff. The second one is better road connections and bridge connections between the surrounding townships and the city. And the third is lower taxes. So Kingston has made the decision, you know, to save money and to spend it. So there will be no net savings. I have decided probably to move away from this whole notion of savings and simply talk about fiscal prudency or something. Because I think it is much more important for the new municipality to have healthy reserves and to recognize that certain reserves should perhaps not be touched because that money has been accumulated in order to build a new park in Bothwell or in Blenheim, and I think that money should perhaps be used for that particular purpose. But there are many other reserves that could be used by the new municipality in its totality. So I think it is more important to instill a regime that says, you know, there shall be a healthy operating reserve, for instance, rather than to say you must save so much money. Because I think it is a misleading and sterile debate. And I like your attitude very much, where you say, well, simply if we put everything together, it can't cost more than it is costing now. In Kent County, they're not entirely convinced of that yet, because they think it's going to cost more, simply because whatever, unionization, or there's a great fear about unionization. So, I have 2 weeks left to issue my final order. So we are looking at maps and representation models, and people are still phoning me and giving me helpful suggestions. And I will have to reflect on all of this and weigh all of this and come up with a model that in my heart of heart is a sensible model in view of all the things that are going on right now with respect to municipal government in Ontario. And it is a lot, as you all know. And how to balance all of that, I don't know yet exactly how to do that. And secondly, what the final result will be, it will be up to the new council to implement it. There will be a transition board, which the regulation provides for, and they will be in fact a substitute council for the new municipality, be it a county or be it a one tier. There shall be a transition board, and they will be responsible for the initial implementation of the order, and then of course the municipal election will be held in November, and then come January 1st, the new council will take office. And I hope everything will go well. Thank you very much.
I'll thank you both more formally at the end, but right now I'll take any questions that people have from the variety of points and issues that were raised. Start right in front.
I'm from Metropolitan Toronto, which I guess represents a third approach to restructuring. But I have a question which it might be a little difficult, but I'd like the two of you to try to answer. Dr. Mabin, when you were showing your slides, particularly in talking, you demonstrated that you were taking obviously a very sensitive and respectful approach to local character, local pride, the sensibilities of all of the communities in the area. And it makes me wonder, in your opinion and in yours too, is there a difference between locally generated solutions and commission imposed solutions in terms of how bold and creative they are? And what I'm wondering was when you seem to be showing so much sensitivity to the local character, were you, as an outsider being brought in to find a solution, perhaps more constrained than a group of people trying to find their own solution?
Well, in my report, my first report, my interim report, I try to deal with that. I try to show them their own wealth, so to speak. I don't mean financial wealth, but you know, the land and the history and the way they have grown up together and all that, because they don't see it. It seems to me sometimes they see it in terms of differences, rather than in terms of differences and similarity. It is very common, you know, in human endeavor, I think. We all know about the competition between, I'll take an example that is far away, Edmonton and Calgary. But if you sit here, there's no difference between Edmonton and Calgary. No real difference between Edmonton and Calgary. So, you know, to what extent are those differences artificially maintained? I don't know. When I speak about it publicly there, they say, yeah, well, you know, you got a point. But in the past, much of their thinking has been influenced by what I call the artificial distinctions. I think it is perfectly possible to maintain all identity, you know. I mean, Blenheim or Bothwell or whatever, you know, is not going to be taken off the map tomorrow. It will continue to exist. And I don't think that the way of government affects the human spirit to the point that an identity is going to be abolished. I will not take big examples, you know, but you can take very big examples. Look at the country of Poland, that didn't exist for 150 years. And pop, there it is again. I mean, talking about maintaining identity. That is why I took Pankour as an example. Everybody speaks French, it's a French school, you know, it's a perfectly fine community, and yet they fit within the broader context. I think it is perfectly possible to maintain identity, because the human spirit cannot be suppressed in such a fashion that it will simply give up its identity. That is my belief, and that is what I wrote in the document, and that is what most people, in the final analysis, I think, agree with. They simply hadn't seen it that way. They hadn't seen Pankour as an example of a community that keeps its identity. Even Pankour hadn't seen it that way.
That's a phrase that I haven't heard before, artificial distinction. If you came down, and I'll speak more of the rural areas, and I can appreciate stepping into a municipality that has been there for 150 years, and the job that it's going to be to bring yourself up to speed on these artificial distinctions. You tell one person in your municipality that the perception that he has of his, whether it be his neighborhood, whether it be his community, or whether it be his county, you're in big trouble. And I can appreciate the fact that a lot of people are going to be terribly upset. So why would you not look at your own politicians to provide the solutions, as opposed to having the doctor come in and do it for you? You cannot have somebody come into your municipality, make a decision that is setting the path for your future, and do it harmoniously. There's no way. You can't do it. If you want to protect these distinctions, if you want to protect the culture, the heritage, everything of any specific area within your municipality, you have to do it. I'm basically telling you, you don't need this guy. You don't. Nobody does. If it can't be done locally, it can't be done right. And I truly believe that. When I go back to this thing about the Glengarry name, the Charland for our municipality, we go on to say that that's now been changed to South Glengarry. We had people come in to it And all of a sudden, the 4 municipalities to the north of the county are amalgamating, the 3 to the south are amalgamating. So now we have North Glengarry and we have South Glengarry. In my mind, and I've only lived in the municipality for 6 years. As a neighbor, lived in the city of Cornwall. I came in there and I said, well, in my mind, if Glengarry as a whole is so significant, why would you want to draw from that and have a north and a south? Because people will soon lose Glengarry as the county and just think of the north or the south. To me, you've taken away from the historical significance. Wrong. And they weren't afraid to tell me. And therefore you have north and south. Artificial? No. I don't think there's any such thing. To somebody outside, it's artificial. To somebody inside and in the community, there's no such thing. So if you want to protect it, do it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. But the law provides for the fact that if it cannot be done, that there is an opportunity to do it differently.
Quite clearly, yeah. Quite clearly, yeah. I'm going to sit between you two guys. I'm just funny.
I would like to talk about this rural-urban for a little anecdote. I was asked by the mayor of Ottawa the other day. You know, Ottawa is thinking about amalgamation and all that, and there's a lot of local dispute, and then there is a rural rim. And she said, well, you know, this urban-rural split is really a significant issue. I hope that this anecdote is off the record, but nevertheless. And I said to her, well, you know, it depends where you sit. I think if you sit here, you call that rural. But if you sit in Paris, you call all of Ottawa rural. And she accepted that, you know, because I think it is true. I think it is a mindset. And as long as you have this mindset, you will never unite and never become strong.
More questions? Yes.
From St. Catharines in the Niagara region, so we have a region and we don't have a municipal act passed right now to be an ASPR commission for the moment. I believe that's going to be in the municipal act that the municipality wants a commissioner, that a commissioner could be appointed. But my understanding is if the commissioner is appointed and you could have an interim proposal and then a final proposal, but my understanding is the final proposal, there is no appeal process after that.
No.
Your word is final, couldn't go to the minister and couldn't do anything.
No, it's
Is
an
that
order.
correct?
That's right.
Okay, and the other question is, and it's more for the board, because you found a local solution, and Dr. Mabin was saying, well, there's a sharp difference between what the elected people think and what the taxpayers think. Did you have some sort of vote or referendum or something like that?
No, and I don't, I think the only time that you get really resistance from the electorate is to come. Whether you do it as one municipality or 3 municipalities, the costs are going to be there. There are economics of scale that come into play when you do it as one. But there's also more of an opportunity to create inefficiencies while you're trying to become efficient. You look at your school boards. Look at some of the things that were done in the past where you did something, you did it to save money, ends up costing you more in the long run. So amalgamations cannot be, in my mind, be too large, mainly because the people in those areas, the people that are going to be elected to those councils to operate, do not have the experience to function in a larger world. And it becomes very competitive. Another thing that was brought up was the competitive nature of municipalities. I mean, it's there. It's always going to be there. It's not going to go away. But Megaweek, amalgamations, look at it different. Don't try to do them both at the same time. You're going to pull your hair out. You're going to go crazy. Resolve in your mind the first step. Can we get along with our neighbors enough to become one? Then deal with the Megaweek announcements and the download.
I would like to add one point to that. I agree with everything you say. I have been talking about this in Chatham Kent, and I have warned people for the expression that is used in the press release announcing the two transition funds. As you know, there is a transition fund for the social services, whatever the final disposition of that is going to be. You probably have heard about that today. You probably know more about it than I do at the moment. And then there is the transition fund for everything else. And in that announcement, there is an, sort of between commas, it says, according to best management practices. Now that is a very interesting observation, because that may mean, I'm not saying that it will mean, because I don't administer that fund, but it could well be that a municipality that has done nothing in terms of amalgamation will come to this fund and say, well, you know, the downloading, the transfer of responsibilities. One is not supposed to say downloading. The transfer of responsibilities to this municipality is going to cost us $10 million, say. We don't have that, and we now want that from your transition fund. If I were to manage that fund, being an ex-Treasury Board official in the federal government, I would say, well, but you can do a great deal more in terms of best management practices before we give you a cent. And knowing how bureaucracies work, I wouldn't be surprised that at one moment or another that will come up. And therefore those municipalities, like yours, who have done certain things, and hopefully Chatham-Kent, who can say, well, we have done everything possible, but we have an irreducible shortfall of $7 million, those will be helped out by this transition fund. I have been chastised for saying this, both by the people in Chatham-Kent and by, not quite by the province, but they say, well, you know, you don't know what is going to happen. No, I don't know what is going to happen. But at the same time, it is my responsibility, as I see it, to be at least be aware of that possible scenario and let the people in Chatham-Kent think about that. Because it is, I think it is going to be, it's going to be an important issue. That best management practices, what is that? Does that mean that the fire station here should also cover off the next municipality by means of some kind of a best management practices agreement? I don't know what it means. But that one term can cover a lot of things that at the moment are not being contemplated by municipal governments.
And that's exactly why I can't see the separation in the two. I think you have to be aware of this.
You have to be aware, but you know, nobody really knows what it is going to be yet. That 28 million that be calculated for Chatham-Kent, I don't know, maybe 20 million.
Thank you.
Yes.
Commissioner, you indicate you're going to have a transition team in place that will, in effect, set up the framework, I guess, of the new government that you'll have in time for the new councils to take over. Can you tell us approximately when you'll issue your report?
The report will be issued on April the 28th. That is prescribed in the terms of reference too. You know, it's 30 days after the deadline of the receipt of submissions, etc., etc., which is April the 25th. I can't make it for the 25th. So, but in any event, the deadline of the whole exercise is April the 30th.
If you go with the two-tier model, will there be two transition teams or one?
No, there will be 5. There will be 6. There will be 7. One for each
One for each
constituent municipality
structure.
and one for the county.
Just maybe, when you're talking about the transition boards that are being created, that may be comprised of whether it be all your council members sitting around, or whether it be 1 or 2 that are appointed. Under the transition board, the decisions of the board are final. In other words, they don't have to go back to each individual council and get their approval to do anything. They actually make the decision totally disregarding any input that the other council members may have. In the cases of our amalgamations, there are 1 or 2 of the municipalities that are amalgamated have went to a board. The board is comprised of everybody on council. And you know, you're going to have to appreciate what they're going to go through with 30 people sitting in a room trying to agree on anything. In our municipalities, we went with a transition committee, which is a committee that only has the opportunity to recommend to the full councils. From there, if solutions are not as easy as going to the councils and being approved, at that point in time there will be a meeting of the complete 3 councils to deal with those specific issues. But be careful when you give, or when the transition board all of a sudden gets into place, and because basically the rest of the councils are out of it. Keep it involved. Settle as many issues as possible that everybody can agree on. Settle them quickly. Deal with the hard ones at a time where you go in, get them done, and you come out. Set time limits to address certain or specific items. Once the time limits are set, similar to the commissioner works to a time limit. That date, decision's got to be made. Like it or not, the decision. And it's the only way that you're going to get things done.
I'm going to take you along next time.
I hope you pay better than these guys.
Hey, who said anything about pay? Any other questions? Yes.
25 years ago, what we're talking about here right now, 25 years ago, the town of Bracebridge was a small community of, say, 5,200 people. It, along with Huntsville, Gravenhurst, Georgian Bay, Lake of Bays, and Municipal Lakes, became part of, or all of, the District of Municipal. And the town of Bracebridge incorporated a lot of small hamlets and small villages, as small as 30 people in a little hamlet to 300, 400 people, taking in, I would say, a minimum of 150 small communities. How much more is the province asking from the District of Municipal? Are they wanting all of Muskoka to be one town now, or basically we have already come through what the
Counties of Stormont.
Warden?
Yeah.
Warden is just in the process of doing right now. That's what I'm hearing. And also what you are trying to do in Kent. We did 25 years ago, and we have a lower tier and an upper tier government consisting of 51 councillors, district and municipal, along with our mayors in each town. We have now 6 towns in the District of Municipal, what they call 6 towns.
I don't think we'll solve the organizational issue of the district here, this afternoon. I do understand, the district is looking at its present structure and examining options and alternatives.
Right.
The regions were given the authority for service delivery review to look at more than just, not governance, but specifically at service arrangement.
We are looking for that too.
Which you presently have that authority to do that. And as I alluded to earlier and was remarked by Dana earlier, as part of the Municipal Act rewrite, some of the powers of restructuring for regions are being discussed. And that it's not saying what they are going to be yet, but they're being discussed as part of that. So you'll be looking at the same principles of achieving cost efficiencies or better governance or more efficient government and less of it than elsewhere in the province. But you may have a slightly different process.
We tried just last spring to downsize our district government. The district council started at the local level. We were wanting to downsize our district government by, I think it was 6. And it ended up that it was passed through the district council to downsize by 12, which would leave, I believe, 12 in council at the district level. We're downsized by 10, leaving 12. And the province, because it wasn't, I believe, more than 2/3 majority of a rule, that they said no. If it wasn't a greater majority than that, then there's no downsizing. So where is all this coming from? We're trying to do our part by eliminating councils or councillors or whatever by a possible $180,000 just in wages. And the province said, no, that's not good enough. We need a greater majority than what we had.
Without getting into too much of the specifics, from what I understand of the district, there was also some other regional councils that were looking at reductions in the number. I think the actual, to do a change in the region would have required an amendment to the District of Municipality Muskoka Act. And I think that was just sort of, it was out in front of what the government was considering as far as change to the legislation, which it's now considering now. So you may well end up with that sort of ability in the future, and that's something that we sort of have to allow you to look at locally generated solutions in the future within the context of what amendments come in the future.
Just maybe, in our counties, SDNG at our county council level, once the restructuring proposal was formulated and we were now going out to get resolutions from the various councils to support this here, to fit the triple majority that's required to go forward. One of the individuals stood up and said, and one of the council members, and said, well, look, why don't we downsize county council? Why don't we talk to the neighboring municipalities and share services? And why don't we do, and there was a few other items or whatever. And I sat there, and he was basically telling the story of our restructuring proposal, but keeping 20 municipalities. And it doesn't really make, downsizing county council or whatever, or region, doesn't save a lot of money.
We downsized to 6
Yeah.
25 years ago. The whole district of Muskoka is now 6, basically 6 communities.
Yeah.
With one district government sitting in the middle that as an upper tier where we have 3 municipal councilors sitting with our mayor at the district level, looking and doing things at the district level, and 5 at the lower tier doing for the municipality.
We don't have a final solution for you today, but thank you for raising some of your issues. Maybe what I'll do is I'll cut things off at this point. I don't know about you, but I find this stuff very fascinating, very interesting, and I'm extremely appreciative of 2 things. One is that Warden was able to come on such short notice and give us a great deal of insight on what has worked locally to provide a locally generated solution, and taking the time to come down and meet with us today and present some of those ideas. And I also would like to thank Commissioner Mayboom for taking time out of his schedule and running between Southwest and Eastern Ontario and stopping for a few moments here in the Toronto area. Mayor Bell will tell me it's Richmond Hill specifically. And to let us know that what has gone on in the Southwest and another process under the restructuring. And I encourage you to grab copies of this booklet. And if you have any questions, you can call either of these individuals or call the regional offices if you want to pursue some interesting some issues in the future. So if I can give you this as a token of our appreciation, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.